Hello, and welcome to another Connection Solutions 2024 event. Firstly, as ever, I'd like to thank Backland Studios for managing all of the functionality here. I say this a lot, but it is true. There's a lot of buttons available to press on the admin side of the webinar, and I like to press as few as possible. So always deeply grateful for Brian at Backland. Some housekeeping for our audience. We are live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and X, as well as direct via StreamYard. If you are logged in via StreamYard, there's a comments field to your right, and you can post any questions there for us. Using the comment section on other platforms will get to us too. So why don't you go ahead, let us know who you are and where you're from in the comments. As ever, I'm Daryl Gillard, Director of Sales at Connex, and I have about 30 years experience helping IT teams achieve their goals in all sorts of fields, whether that be software, cybersecurity, or infrastructure. With me today is Christy Kanan and Shane Fremo of Scale Computing, who are a Connex infrastructure partner. Christy is the Canadian channel manager at Scale Computing and has been instrumental in recruiting, developing, and nurturing relationships with channel partners like Connex across Canada. Prior to this role, she's held key positions at Salesforce.com Canada, Climb Channel Solutions, Interwork Technologies, Ingram Micro Canada, and SoftChoice LP. Shane has been in IT probably longer than he wants me to let you know, and has served his time on the other side of the fence, so to speak, including being IT manager at a healthcare facility and a municipality. Welcome aboard, both of you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daryl, for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Been a pleasure prepping for this, and it's going to be a lot of fun making this happen as well. We will also be joined by two very special guests for our fireside chat. That is Tim Bramham, the Director of IT at Kingston Police, who switched to Scale last year, and Connex's founder and principal, David Van Remortel. All four of these guests recently came back from Scale Computing's Platform 2024, where they spoke to, learned, and networked with other Scale employees, partners, and customers. Our agenda today, there'll be a little bit about us. A little bit about us, the sponsor of the event. Then Christy and Shane will take us into how Scale Computing is well positioned to be your go-to VMware replacement. Then we'll take questions and we'll have a fireside chat about what we're hearing from the market and hear a little bit from Tim about his experience migrating to Scale. Connex is built on three pillars. One, built for clients. Not only do we have decades of experience either being in or leading IT teams or helping them as a solutions provider, but we are intensely client driven. As an example, if clients have needs beyond our current partners' capabilities, we scour the globe to find a solution that fits. Simply put, we're here to make IT teams' day run a little bit better. We are powered by partners. Our open partner model ensures that we focus on stability and security with partners in it for the long term. Where appropriate, Connex ensures that partners can work with each other to ease daily use for the IT team. And finally, we're focused on value. Connex ensures that each client solution helps reduce costs, improve business resilience and capability, and is easy to use. We also make sure that our partners bring enterprise-level capability to SMB and local government organizations that don't have that multi-million-dollar budget to work with necessarily. So we work with partners that care about this space the same way as we do. And talking of partners that care about that, I'm going to hand over to Christy now. We are fully prepared to take your questions live during the presentation. So by all means, enter any in your appropriate comments field as you're viewing us. Hi, Christy.
Hello. Thank you. So as my presentation comes up onto the screen here for you guys, really my goal today is to walk you through a new way really to focus on virtualization, but also as the data center as a whole. As Daryl had mentioned earlier, we really are positioning ourselves right now in the market as one of the top VMware alternatives to be looked at and reviewed when it comes to the data center, when it comes to hyper-converged infrastructure, and then of course with everything going on with the VMware and Broadcom acquisition, there's a lot of customers out there that have been left to the wayside from Broadcom, with a lot of numbers coming at them when it comes to renewal costs, new licensing costs that are just not in the budget to be able to be swallowed today. So my goal over the next 10 minutes is just to walk you through a quick overview of scale computing as a company, scale computing as a solution, and then where and why we are targeting ourselves as one of the top alternatives to VMware. And then after I'm complete, like Daryl said, we're going to pass it over to Shane to do a walkthrough of our UI. So without further ado, scale computing has been around for quite a while now. We were actually created back in 2008. Our co-founders originally came to market with a storage platform, but since then created what is now known as our hyper-converged infrastructure solution. That came to market in 2012. And since that time, we are now seen with customers and partners across the globe. We're in over 100 and almost 15 countries at this point. So very glad to be able to not only be in North America making a very large impact to the North American industries, but also globally from all over the world. So to be able to get to that point, we wouldn't be able to be here without our technology alliance partners. So some of those you're going to see on the screen here. This is not an exhaustive list. So please don't hesitate to ask if there's some on here that are not being called out. We work with a lot of different partners across the tech industry, so happy to help support where those needs come up. But a few of them I wanted to call out. As an HCI solution, we are an on-premise solution, which means we have hardware. Our hardware is the one piece of our solution that we do not create. We do partner up with our technology alliance partners for their hardware that is known and tested and trusted across all businesses. A few of them I'll call out here: Lenovo, Dell, Supermicro, and now Asus having the NUC line, buying that from Intel earlier, or I guess late last year. So those are some of the partners that we will leverage today as our hardware counterpart. And then we will establish through the rest of the software from something that Scale has created. Some of the other names that are on here, though, do help us expand our solution. So one I'll call out that is always a topic when anything data center or virtualization comes up, and that's backup. So Acronis is one I'll call out here, and I know Connex is also an Acronis partner as well. Acronis is one of the partners that we have fully integrated into our solution. But again, as I mentioned, it's not the only backup vendor that we do work with. We are available to work with any of the backup partners. It's just going to be a little bit of a difference between agent versus agentless. As I will kind of speak to the backup piece, I know Veeam does come up a lot for a number of people. That is one that has become a whole new world of fun for us as of this year with everything going on with VMware. As of right now, we are not integrated with them, but conversations are always happening, and we know there's going to be lots of changes kind of coming down the pipe over the next several months to the next few years. So always check in with us. And again, like I said, we're happy to help with a number of the different alliance partners that we work with around the world. So last I'll kind of mention on here is our customers. We are in every industry across the world. So from that standpoint, this is a marketing slide. So of course, we're going to put some of the fun, flashy names up here, but please don't let that pull away from the SMB and mid-market space that we also support very largely, especially in North America. Really, our ideal platform customer base is looking at companies, regardless of the employee count, but focusing on the number of IT support staff. We know that running a data center is not an easy feat to go through. So our goal at scale is to really come and give you something that is simple to manage. So having IT teams that are very limited in terms of manpower, giving them something that is simple to manage so that they can put their focus on other things is really our intentional goal. And with that comes along our top-notch support, which I do want to mention. We have one of the best support teams out there. They are located and working out of the US. We have an average of a 7-second phone pickup time. Obviously, the goal is to not ever need support, but when support is needed, we want to make sure that you have the best people there to be able to support you from that standpoint. So moving on from us as a company and going into our solution, HCI or hyperconverged infrastructure is probably not a new term to anybody. So I really want to speak to what is Scale Computing's HCI solution. So as I mentioned, we are an on-prem hardware solution that includes the software and the support that comes along with it. So on the far left-hand side, you're going to see what the compute part of HCI. And like I mentioned, the Lenovos, the Dells, the Asuses of the world are who we help leverage for that hardware. And then really kind of what makes the meat and potatoes of our solution is our software that runs the storage and the hypervisor levels of our HCI solution. So we have named these internally. Our storage is called Scribe, and then HyperCore for our hypervisor. Those are, again, part of our software solution that we will package in with our hardware and sell through our partners to you guys as end users as that total HCI solution. And then really at the bottom, it's just around rounding everything together and leveraging our software to be able to make sure that everything is effortless when it comes to deploying and securing and managing our infrastructure on site for you guys. To speak a little bit around kind of what also makes our HCI platform a little bit different and more cost effective than what else is out there in either the HCI space or a traditional 3-2-1 setup. This snapshot, I think, is a great way to look at how the build and the overall model is different for Scale versus our competitors in the space. So other ones that are out there, I won't name the competitor names, but I'm sure everybody's got them kind of coming top of mind, is typically what you're going to see on the left-hand side of the screen over here. So looking at HCI as a whole, most people will say, oh, it's a very expensive and not really cost-effective solution. The reason why that is because typically the software that's being put onto the hardware to create that HCI solution is very, very heavy on the hardware to stand up. So on average, you're going to see between 96 and 300 gigabytes of RAM, 12 cores just to stand up the solution, never mind actually running the data through it. And that's really where the cost comes into play. So when our co-founders came up with our HCI solution, the real focus was, yes, around simplicity, but also making it cost effective for the SMB and mid-market space to be able to afford and bring HCI into their environment. So with our integrated hypervisor model, we can be a very lean software to run on the hardware, utilizing less than 12 gigabytes of RAM and a fraction of a core to be able to stand us up. So because of that, we are able then to fit on a lot smaller of a footprint when it comes to our hardware, allowing us to really make sure that we're making this a cost-effective solution for our customers. So to give you a little bit of a visual on where we can scale up to and down from our hardware infrastructure. So on the far left-hand side, you're going to see what used to be the Intel NUCs now being provided by ASUS. We can leverage, and again, we have a number of SMB customers running off of clusters of NUCs, believe it or not. So those of you that may not have ever seen one, think about the size of an Apple TV. They are quite small, they are space saving, and also a very cost-effective solution, but also kind of small and mighty from that standpoint. Kind of moving yourself across the slide here, you will see us be able to scale up and down to the larger enterprise grade servers as well, making us a solid solution for the enterprise space when it comes to the core data center, and then leveraging the NUCs more for edge deployments as well. To touch just on a little bit more of what our 4 key pillars are, I've really kind of touched on the affordability piece and the simplicity piece, but to really kind of expand on that, the high availability is another piece of our solution that we like to sit on. As most HCI solutions are, we are a clustered solution, allowing us to have those 3 nodes within that cluster as kind of the base version, allowing that if anything happens on that first node, being able to self-heal and load balance on the other 2 nodes. On the backup and replication side of things, we have a great capacity for snapshotting. Of course, that does not negate any need for backup solutions. So having things like Acronis be able to be fully integrated into our system as well. And then from a scalability standpoint, I want to make sure I touch on the fact that within our cluster, because of the way that our software is actually what is running the hardware, we are able to not only mix and match brands within the cluster, but also be able to mix and match the different versions running on each cluster as well, giving it a bit more of again, ease of management when it comes to you as the IT department being able to manage our solution kind of end to end. Mostly what I've been talking about over the last few minutes is really kind of what encompasses the on-prem hardware solution that we have under the Scale platform. One thing I want to do mention and speak to for the customers that either have multiple sites where you'll have clusters located on different locations across a large kilometer range, or those who are managing different clusters and want an actual centralized cloud management console to be able to manage those clusters. We do have Fleet Manager as an option that can be added on to your solution to be able to manage and have a single sign-on piece of equipment to be able to help and deploy your clusters overall. Last but not least, when it comes to our solution as a whole, one of the big questions that is going to come up is how do we manage migration from your current solution to Scale Computing? At a very high level, it's very simple. Again, leaning on that goal of being the most simplistic model we can be for you guys and within your data center. So there's a couple of ways that we can go about this. On the left-hand side, you're going to see some of the different ways that it can be done. I will speak to the Scale Move product, which is seen on the bottom left corner there. That is typically 9 times out of 10 what we are going to leverage to be able to move your workloads from your current environment to the Scale environment. And that is by leveraging one of our Technology Alliance partners, OpenText, and their Carbonite software to be able to help with that. I'm sure Tim a little bit later will be able to speak to kind of how we helped leverage that product as well when we navigated the Kingston Police migration. On the right-hand side, just some additional things that we can speak to when it comes to migration. And that really comes to either helping you navigate it. Our support team can be leveraged to do and complete one move or one VM move, or we can do them all. It really depends. Overall, our goal is to be able to, again, make it easy for you to be able to manage this. And that includes doing and completing the migration as well. So our support teams can be on the phone with you or in person to help navigate and show you how to do the first few moves, and then have you take the baton and basically try it out yourself, see how it goes, and have our support team there to help you. Or on the complete opposite side of that, we can completely manage that entire migration for you and then basically hand the keys over when things are ready to go. So just a quick snapshot. Obviously, it's a very high level of the migration path for you guys, but happy to dive in deeper as we set up hopefully some additional calls with you guys and connects kind of moving forward. So really, where is the Scale opportunity when it comes to the overall virtualization world that we're living in today? So high level, most of what people are coming up with when it comes to these conversations is VMware and what is going on with the Broadcom acquisition. So quickly, I want to kind of just speak through some of the things that are being brought forward by customers like yourselves when it comes to just concerns outside of the acquisition. Of course, the acquisition is there and you will see it as concern number 4, but I want to talk about concerns 1 through 3 first, and just see that there's more than just the corporate changes that are driving customers away from VMware and moving over to other alternatives. By no means are we sitting here and harping too much on VMware. Realistically, we would not be here today as a solution if it wasn't for VMware creating this hypervisor world. So we appreciate kind of the industry that's been created out of it. But at the end of the day, there are so many other solutions and options out there that are just becoming as strong, if not stronger, than where VMware is sitting today. So what couple of the concerns that come up: overall reliability. Downtime is obviously something that is what keeps a lot of IT managers up at night. On average, through some of the surveys that were conducted over the last couple of years, customers of VMware are seeing about 34 hours of downtime. That is very costly to you as a company. To some companies, that's going to absolutely devastate them and unfortunately cause them to shut down. Others, it's just going to make a heavy impact, but then it's all about having now trying to figure out how to come back from that, which is never a position that you want to be in. Concern 2 that's really kind of come forward is just an overall value. I think as we continue to see what's going on with the Broadcom acquisition this year, this has continued to kind of come to light and showing that at the end of the day, for the cost that is required for your VMware licenses, are you really receiving what you're expecting out of those products? A lot of these customers are coming back and saying, nope, that's not the case. And I think is even more and has been exacerbated even more today now with the intensified pricing coming out of VMware and Broadcom. And then concern number 3 is just overall complexity. We know that for VMware specialists today, being able to put in the hours of certifications, the cost to those certifications, the time and energy that's put into those certifications, a lot of that is again, very complex. You have to keep up to date with those on an annual basis. Again, just driving more and more focus on having to manage a complex environment, which then speaks to the actual amount of time then is spent managing that environment. So on average in 2023, users were spending about 16.8 hours a week managing and patching VMware solutions. With an HCI solution where things are self-healing, and Shane will speak to this a little bit as well, with him being able to see this on the end user side of things as a previous IT manager with Scale. He's more in the UI now as an employee than he ever was as an IT manager for a hospital. So that kind of encompasses a bit more of the other concerns that have come up with VMware customers. And then, of course, leaning into the biggest one that I think is top of mind for a lot of people today, and that is around the corporate changes. When this survey was completed, this was before everything had finally closed in November last year with Broadcom, and we have continued to see it now in the first 4 months of 2024, how much this acquisition is impacting the customers of VMware. Very similarly to the Broadcom acquisition of Symantec, at this point in time, Broadcom has come out, their CEO has come out and made a very big impact statement around how their main focus is going to be on the top 600 customers of VMware, leaving hundreds, if not tens of hundreds of thousands off to the side to try and figure out what to do now with their environment. We have had a number of conversations with companies that are in the in public sector, in charity organizations that have gone to VMware and say, we can't afford these increases you've given us on our renewals. What do we do? And they've come back and said to them, at this point, we'll just have to tell you that VMware isn't for everybody. That is such a devastating impact to a business, especially ones that are publicly funded and don't have endless amounts of cash to be able to push out. So really being able to take a look and say, you know what, why can't we find another company that is going to take pride in the customers that they work with? And I think that's something exactly what Scale is doing and wanting to push out there, is that we want to help take care of you just as much as we take care of our partners. So with that being said, I will continue to navigate this conversation over to Shane, who will walk us through a demonstration of our UI. Thank you very much.
All right. There we go. All right. So thanks, Christy. That gives a very good background on what Scale brings to the table. I've already logged into a cluster here. This is actually sitting right behind me in my office. And that one slide that Christy had showing the NUC-based solution that we have, that's actually what this is running on. So this is a 3-node NUC-based cluster that I've just pointed myself at one of the nodes in the cluster, this .150 node as an example. Scale clusters for a highly available system, we start with a 3-node cluster, and that protects against if we lose a drive, if we, in a worst case, lose a node, we build it to be n+1. So what happens, and I'll actually show you here live what that looks like if one of these nodes were to go offline, what happens with the system. We protect against that. The system is self-healing. So what will happen is this node over here, if it goes offline, these 2 virtual machines that are currently running there are going to automatically restart on the other nodes in the cluster. The nice thing about this is if that kind of worst case scenario does happen, if it's in the middle of the night, nobody's actively, in monitoring the system, that's going to happen automatically. So the cluster is going to take actions for you. It's going to alert whoever's managing the system and whoever's set up to get the alerts. It's going to alert them to what's going on, but it's going to take those actions automatically without somebody having to log in and do any kind of manual work in there at all. Everything from the management aspect of the cluster is done through our web UI that you're seeing here right now. Like I mentioned, I logged into this first node. I can actually log into any of the nodes in this cluster and get this same UI. It's baked into the hardware, so it runs directly on the nodes, on the devices themselves. There's no master node, and there's no appliance VM that we run that would lock you out of the system. So like I mentioned before, if I was logged into this node and it happened to go offline, I could just log into one of these other ones and continue to operate the cluster. Across the top, what you're seeing in this kind of gas gauge style display up here is what we have for resources in the cluster. So in this particular one, we have 12 cores because these are 4-core i5s because these are, again, NUC-based nodes, 92 gigs of RAM. And then on the storage, we have 1.4 terabytes of raw storage. Again, in Christie's kind of part of the presentation, she mentioned Scribe, which is our storage system. The way that works at a high level is once a block, it's block-based storage. So once a block is written to the cluster, it's then written to another physically separate location in the cluster. So there's always 2 copies of your data at all times on the cluster. And that's where that redundancy comes from. So that 1.4 terabytes of raw storage, you're going to get about half of that as actual usable storage because of that redundancy built in. Again, this cluster we're looking at here is on the smaller side. So if I click on the disk view here, you'll see that these are individual single drive units. This being on the smaller side, this configuration, when we get into bigger deployments, we start looking at multiple drives, tiered systems where we have a mixture of SSD and spinning drives or NVMe and spinning drives, or in the highest performing ones, we have full NVMe chassis as well. So when we're talking about multi-drive deployments, the system also protects against losing multiple drives. So if this was a 4-drive solution, like that's a kind of a common deployment that we see where we have a single SSD and 3 spinning drives in each node. That type of deployment, if we're in a 3-node cluster like this, you could have multiple drives fail at the same time and continue to be up and running, not lose any data. What happens is if you do lose a drive, the system will, of course, alert you to what's going on. And then what will happen at that point is it will automatically make sure whatever data was on that drive is re-replicated within the cluster. So that drive fails, we make sure that there's 2 copies of that data again. We let you know that, hey, this drive has failed. You need to look at getting a replacement. That's where our support team comes in, which Christy also mentioned is 24/7, 365 out of our Indianapolis office. So You give them a ring, they'll send you out a replacement drive that comes to you next business day. And again, in those 4 drive deployments, it's a simple hot swap. You pull that dead drive out, you put the new one in, and then you allow the system to continue on from there. And what will happen is the cluster will just see that drive as usable storage, and then it will actually just start to fill that up naturally over time. We don't do like a RAID rebuild when that happens, because we've already protected the data that was there. So we just say, hey, this is available storage for the cluster. Let's continue on, and away we go. And you can imagine a drive failure would be probably one of the more common failures that you would see. So that's why we're able, we built it to be resilient against drive failures, and then make that replacement as easy as can be. So now I mentioned also that I'll show you what a node failure would look like. So I'm just going to go off camera here for 1 second. And I'm going to pull the power on one of these NUCs here. And then very shortly, I'm not going to touch anything. We'll see what happens here live. And I'm just going to turn my camera back on here. And we'll see what happens here as far as what the system starts doing. So I'm not going to click on anything. I'm just going to, I'll click on one thing. I'm going to move this back over to the RAM view. And then I'll keep talking while the system is going to start realizing that, hey, that node is unreachable. So part of the presentation you've seen earlier in the slides was a call out about, our different pieces of our solution. They're being Scribe, the hardware Scribe, and HyperCore. And then there's also a piece that is kind of hidden in behind the scenes that we call AIM, which is our automation piece that runs in behind the scenes, is constantly checking on the metrics on the cluster, seeing right down to the base hardware, what's going on, our drives, seeing something, is there read and write errors on drives, that kind of thing. AIM is what starts seeing that, hey, something isn't right with the cluster, we got to start taking action. So it's always trying to get the cluster into the best possible state that it can. And what that means is it will start taking actions automatically to get things back up and running. So we're going to see here that already the system's saying, hey, data redundancy is degraded because it's noticed that something is going on and it can't communicate with this node over here. So there is a network, a separate network. We call it our backplane network. That's how the nodes actually communicate with each other. That's where right now they're saying, hey, we can't communicate with this node over here. And then I'm actually getting emails in the background right now because I'm set up as the one to get the email alerts for my cluster, of course, telling me that, hey, something is going on. So you can think of this in the middle of the night if it's happening. By the time, you get the alert, you get an email message, whatever it might be, and you log into your system and you can see it's marked off, that node's marked offline now. Those VMs have already been restarted on the other nodes in the cluster. So I had 2 VMs over there. They've restarted on these other nodes automatically. I haven't had to touch anything. The idea here is let's get your workloads back up and running. And then when you see this going on, you can get in contact with our support team, which does a really awesome job. And I can speak, to that from experience because I did manage a scale deployment before. And you get on the phone with them and say, hey, I have a problem with my cluster. I need to see, what's going on. I need some help. They have the ability to get into the back end of the cluster. There's actually, I'll show you here quickly, there's a remote support area, and they'll give you a code like this one here to open a secure tunnel to that technician that's working with you from Scale. What they will do at that point is they'll dig in, see what's going on, and then kind of verify what happened. In this case, if this hardware has failed, let's say something, to my NUC, something has happened and it's toast, basically, it won't work anymore. What we'll do is we'll send out an entire replacement next business day. We don't roll a tech to site to diagnose issues, that kind of thing. The idea there is let's get you new hardware, replacement hardware in hand to then be able to put it back into place so that we can get you back up and running at 100% as quickly as possible. So everything's running here, and let's say that happens. So I'm just going to go off camera here again for a second, and you'll see I'm going to plug that node back in. So you can imagine if I got the replacement next business day, I'm like, okay, all I have to do is just cable it up and power it on exactly like the one that failed. And that's what I'm doing right now. So I'm going to power that one back on. And I'm hands off again. And because our software is baked directly in, there's actually a small partition on the drives that runs our software. When that node boots back up, it's going to say, hey, I know I'm part of a cluster. I have to rejoin myself back in. The cluster then is going to say, we got to check this node, make sure that it's good to go, that it's healthy. We can join it back into the cluster. And we'll see these notices will start to change here in a minute as that happens. And then those virtual machines that were there before, they want to move back over and run on that node again. So that's their preferred node to run on. And what happens at that point is they'll do a live migration. So if anybody here is familiar with VMware, which most people are at some point in their IT careers have touched VMware or something like it, they have vMotion, which is moving a VM from one host to another. That's very similar to what a live migration is. It's just going to move a VM from running on one node to another one. End users have no idea that's going on. It's seamless. It just goes ahead and moves on to that node. Once this is back up and running, I'll talk about how we take advantage of that as well for doing a rolling update to the system. We make that very, very easy for you as well. So you can see here, VMs will attempt to migrate back to preferred nodes. So this guy right now, again, I haven't clicked anything. I'm sure everybody can see that. I've just kind of tried to keep the screen up while this is going on. That will show back online here shortly. And then once things kind of check out, those VMs will move back over.
Yeah, Shane, I wanted to just confirm the only thing you physically touched was cable, pulling a power cable.
I just pulled a power cable. That was it. I didn't do anything else.
Everything else is Scale platform looking after itself, right?
And this is live. This isn't pre-recorded. I'm moving my mouse around. You're not seeing anything pre-recorded. We're doing this live. I trust enough in the system that it's going to do its job. And as it did, I mean, those VMs restarted, no problem. Again, this process of it coming back in takes a little bit longer because we want to make sure that everything is good to go, right? We're up and running right now. This is kind of the key piece as well, is that when you work with Connex and us as a team to come up with a solution for you for your environment, we build it in such a way that there's enough resources on two nodes in order to run all of your virtual machines. So we build it with that N+1 mentality. So for this worst case scenario, we know there's enough resources on, in this case, on two nodes in order to run all the virtual machines. So you can see this guy's come back online. So what will happen is in the short order here, these VMs will move themselves back over. Like I mentioned, simplicity is something that we talk about a lot. And actually our tagline is simplicity engineered. So this UI is meant to be very, very straightforward and very simple. We kind of bring that as well to how we do our updates. So I don't have an update available on this cluster right now. You can see it's running on this 9.2.27 currently. But if I did have an update available, it would show underneath here. And I would see that, and I can actually click on this right now, and you're going to see, hey, your cluster, right now you see your cluster's up to date, which obviously is good news. But if I had an update available, what would happen is I would see, a little bit of information here on what the version number of that update is, and a call out to roughly how long that update is going to take, and a link to the full release note for that update. And also on the far right over here, I would just simply have an apply update button. So it really is that straightforward to update the system. Because we offer this as an appliance-based solution, we know the hardware extremely well. We know it down to, the smallest pieces of the configuration. And what that allows us to do when we roll an update is our team is able to test against all those different configurations before we roll an update. So that when you see that available update in there, it's compatible with your system. You don't have to worry about something not quite working or being on the right version, you know, when you see that, hey, we've tested it, we've rolled it out to you, you can apply it to your system freely. And actually you can apply it in a way that you don't even have to set a big maintenance window to do that. So again, in a cluster like this one here, we always like to talk about our 3-node clusters. If I was to click that apply update button, if I had one, what would happen is very similar to this kind of failover that we just seen. This first node here is going to download that update, and these VMs that are running are going to live migrate off of that node onto my other ones. So that node would be freed up of all of its running VMs, and then that update can apply, and that node can reboot. And all I've had to do as let's say the IT manager that's managing the system is click that apply update button. What happens is I get taken to a progress screen so that I can't go in and change anything, because we don't want you going in there and changing anything while updates are going through. But your virtual machines continue to run while we go through the rolling update process. So it's going to do that one node at a time, apply, migrate the VMs off, apply the update, reboot the node. The same check that this node is going through right now is what's going to happen after an update happens to a node. And then once that goes through, it's going to say, hey, I want my virtual machines back. So they're going to live migrate back over there. And then the next node is going to go through the same process. And we can do that one node at a time. Again, we start with a 3-node cluster, but we're like Lego blocks where you can start adding more if you grow. So let's say you have 4, 5, 6 nodes, no problem. It's going to update one node at a time until the entire cluster is running on the new version of our software. So makes that updating process very, very simple. I always talk to, I have these conversations, and maybe somebody here we're going to have a deeper conversation with. When we talk about people are a little antsy about kicking those updates off, even after we've kind of explained how they work. This is where our support team comes in again. If you want to, give them a call and say, hey, I'm not comfortable doing this update, can you guys help me out? They're more than happy to hop in and kick an update off for you and even monitor it just to make sure everything is good to go. They really become an extension of your on-site team at that point. They're there to help you. If you have any questions, you can easily either email them or call them up and get those answers. So really, you can sleep, good at night knowing you have that team available to you 24/7, 365. So I mentioned the update process. The other kind of piece too, when I'm talking about updates, is we may roll new features with the updates. I mean, we've rolled a number of new features. Even I've only been at scale a short time, but we've released a number of new features. And the nice thing with our model is there's no tiers to our licensing. So everything you see here runs on our smallest hardware to our largest hardware. The feature set is the same across all of them. So you get all the same features, even if it's on our smaller devices like these ones here, up to our big, we have those big 2U rack mount servers for lots of storage and lots of compute. But the feature set, the nice thing is if you have up-to-date support and licensing on the cluster, if we roll new updates with new features, you get access to those. So as the product continues to develop over time, you get access to those features as well. And then I kind of mentioned that we're kind of like Lego blocks in terms of adding new nodes to the cluster. We're also forward and backward compatible. So if you want to, put a cluster in 1 year and then you start adding stuff to it a year or two down the road, and we've come up with a new offering, that'll be compatible with your current cluster. So you don't ever have to worry about us leaving you behind with newer things coming out. We make sure that it's still compatible as you move forward. So I think I'm almost running out of time. And I told Daryl that I was going to be on time today. I even set a timer to make sure that I was going to be on time. But we are more than happy to set up other conversations to dive even deeper into the solution, because I only had so much time today to kind of just scratch the surface. But the team over here is more than happy to have those conversations as well.
Thanks, Shane. I was going to say you didn't even get a chance to show standing up a new VM, but that's a matter of seconds, isn't it? Not that I'm.
I could. While we're talking, I could even show that. Here we go.
No,
let's go.
We've reached that time. Come on, buddy.
Yeah, we're good. It's very straightforward. You fill this out, hit create, you have a VM.
Yeah,
That's all. That's my 2 seconds.
It's a matter of seconds, right? So appreciate you paying attention to the time there, Shane, as well. Thank you, Christy.
No problem.
I was lucky enough to see Jeff Reedy's opening talk at Platform 2024, and he struck a chord with us at Connex that you guys showed as well. He talked about striving to be the best possible partner to our customers and partners every day, which is so important. You know, the whole backwards compatibility, the whole upgrades happening without too much trouble / we'll come in and do that for you, and we'll talk about migration a little bit as well. And a lot of it comes down to that simplicity. And we heard a phrase at last month's webinar, which is there is no resiliency without simplicity. So yeah, if it takes too long to get things back up and running, or if it's too complex and you can make too many mistakes, how's that a resilient system? So again, the platform being as simple as it is just increases that ability to be resilient, I feel. All right, let me introduce our first special guest, Tim Bramham, Director of IT at Kingston Police. I am super excited about this, Tim. You are the first Connex customer that we've had on one of our webinars this year. So thank you very much. Tim has extensive experience in both public and private organizations, leading IT teams and serving hundreds of staff. And of course, in his current role, that staff needs some of the most critical IT systems at their fingertips 24/7. And I know that's something that we'll touch on later. Second guest needs little introduction in most IT circles in Ontario. David Van Remortel. He's the founder and principal of Connex, which has its roots extending all the way back to 2009. David, too, has been on both sides of the fence, spending many years leading IT teams in both private and public sectors. And Connex is founded on the principle that IT teams' days are hard enough as it is, as per David's experience. So we're here to help make IT teams' days go a little better, and we work with partners that see the world that way too. I think that construction noise you were talking about, DVR, has got a little bit louder back there, but I'm sure we can fight our way through it. Tim, David, thank you very much for joining us for our fireside chat.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for everyone attending today.
Happy to be here.
Talking of people attending, I'd like to remind our audience that questions can be submitted as comments from LinkedIn, other platforms, or here on StreamYard. We are more than happy to take questions as they come along. But one of the things I wanted to talk about, what we saw, Shane, was great, absolutely. Even though you only had a limited amount of time to get in there, I know, I appreciate it. But one question that seems to come up, and especially from long-standing VMware customers, again and again, is the concern that migrating from VMware will be just too difficult. Christy, I know you touched base on this again, times constraints and things, but clearly that's something Scale has heard from the market and is building programs to help too, right, Christy?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I'll send it over to Shane in a sec to kind of talk through it a little bit more in depth. But one thing, just as an overall, something that Scale has been doing over the last several months, if not even previous to that, is kind of preemptively knowing what was going to potentially be coming from the Broadcom acquisition and preparing to help kind of answer some of those top questions. So we have documentation that we can share with you guys and through Connex as well that kind of helps answer those top questions and concerns that VMware customers have navigating from VMware to Scale Computing. And one of the things that obviously does come top of mind, like you mentioned, Daryl, is migration. So it does talk about migration on there. Again, high level, it is a couple page document, but it will speak to that overall. But Shane, maybe I'll toss it to you to just kind of talk through it a little bit more tech-wise than I can give it justice for.
Sure, yeah. And I mean, we have a number of tools that are, available to make that migration basically as seamless as we possibly can. There's always kind of, depending on environments and that kind of thing, there's always different things that come up in a migration, and we know that we've done enough of them at this point. I always kind of joke now when I have this conversation that there's probably a VMware migration going on while we're speaking. We're doing that many of them that, our team is more than likely doing one right now. So it's very common. The nice thing is we have the software and the partnerships actually with the providers of the software to make that super easy. So OpenText Carbonite is the one that Christy mentioned before. That's kind of our go-to tool because it cuts the downtime from doing a cutover for a virtual machine or even a physical to a virtual machine, cuts that down to minutes instead of having to set this huge maintenance window, in order to do the migration. We have other tools available too. So that one, like I said, is more for if you want to have that downtime limited to, let's say, minutes. If it's an important application, you can't have it down for a long period of time. But then we have other tools where if you have some VMs that maybe could, it's like, if this is down for a day, it's not a big deal. You can export out a VMDK file, and there's a process to import that directly into a scale cluster, and it converts it into a format that we can use in behind the scenes. So that's available. So we use QCOW2. Not to get too technical, but that's the open source file format for VMs. That's what we use under the hood. So that conversion process happens under the hood as well. At our platform event, we've also kind of teased that we have some other migration tools coming. I don't know anything more about that other than more migration tools are coming. So I don't have anything more to share on that. But our team as well, and this was kind of mentioned in Christy's slide, is we have migration services available too. So traditionally, we've provided guidance on doing a couple of migrations and then kind of turned it over to the local IT team at that point. But now we can offer full migration. So somebody has 100 virtual machines and they want to migrate them, the scale services team can do that full migration for them now too. And just you guys could be hands off at that point and just leave it to us.
And Tim, this is probably an excellent start point to bring you into the conversation. You went through this whole process last year, right?
Yeah, we sure did. The process is literally as seamless as Shane has been saying. That was one of the obviously concerns we have when we were looking at moving over from our old providers to scale. And really, in policing, we do have some sort of really not necessarily custom applications, but really some more difficult ones to migrate, since there are some of them can be older and some are very specific to not really mainstream ones, right? So we had some concerns with whether those ones we're going to be able to be migrated over. And we do operate a 911 center here, so 24/7 operation is pretty key. So minimizing any type of downtime we're going to have was definitely a huge concern. And with the Carbonite Move product, it literally takes it to all you need to do is reboot your system, and you're pretty much up and running on the new platform. It gets them in synchronization, and then as soon as you hit they're synchronized, you just hit the finalize button, and it reboots the system and pops it on the scale box. We also have done some where we exported out the VMs as well out of VMware. The new part that they're talking about at scale is that it's going to directly import even compressed ones, which is nice. But uncompressed ones go in right away, and it's a fast process. It does take some downtime for that, but like I said, if it's something that doesn't need to be right away, then it's easy to do. That's something we're very happy to see.
Great. And David, I'll bring you in here. That speaks to the power of what Connex does in bringing these partners together and having a deep understanding of each of them, right?
Absolutely. One of the things that we brought when we launched Connex was something called our open partner model. And so when we create a technical solution for a client, we bring the partners in who are a part of that solution so that we understand where the overlaps are. We understand where the support is from a start and stop point of view. It really helps bring a total view to the table for when we bring a solution to a client. As opposed to historically, we've seen in the past, clients will get a piece of a solution from one partner, and then they have a separate support piece they need to do and a separate support piece for the next piece. That's one of the great things about working with Scale. It is a one-stop support environment, and Connex embraces that, because with every client that Connex brings on board, we stay with you during the life of the cycle that you have the piece of technology with.
Absolutely, and I know that power came to force when we were migrating Kingston Police over last year. Christy, Shane, anything else you guys want to add in terms of migration services, or have we pretty much covered that topic?
I think from migration, that's pretty clear. I think I'd like to add on to DVR's point there too around like the support piece. And I think that's something I missed in my presentation that usually I do speak about. all pieces of our solution, from hardware to software, is covered by our support team, and that can be supplemented as well by the partner that's involved as well. So for Connex, for example, and then even kind of expanding on that. So I mentioned the technology alliance partners that we work with. I'll pick on Acronis again. If that Acronis piece is bought through Scale on our solution, our support team will also support Acronis. So you're not having to then call Acronis separately to navigate a backup question or issue that's popped up. If it is bought and along with Scale through Scale solution, that is going to be supported by our team as well. So our support team is not just there on our own hardware and software, but also a number of the different technology alliance partners that we work with. So another great reason to kind of navigate over that whole concept of one throat to choke. It's not my favorite saying, but it really is that whole concept of being able to leverage one vendor for it, a support team that can manage it, but then also not having to fully navigate one solution to be all parts of your data center either, right? So I think it gives a good medium to that, depending on the vendor sorts that you've got within your environment.
Yeah, I think that speaks very clearly to why Scale and Connex like each other, because we put the customer first, right? And it doesn't matter if someone calls up and says it's the Acronis piece that isn't working. Great, let's help you with that. Got a whole story I'm not going to tell, but I'll tell you after the webinar maybe about a guy called Tony Shea and how he built his support team to help. That's going to take too long to tell right now, because I do want to touch on this as well. I talked a little bit about simplicity. Shane, you were definitely showing simplicity, and I know that there's that video out there of one of your colleagues' second grader kids standing up a cluster. That's how simple and easy it can be to use. I was going to ask Shane, as a previous user, Tim as a current user, what's the effect of that? Tim, let's start with you. What's the effect of that on a day-to-day basis of having something that is so easy to use and manage?
Yeah, it's like having a force multiplier, right? I mean, before, for old system, being a smaller police department, we had to rely on having third-party vendors to support us and to help us with that VMware portion of things, because we just didn't have the internal resources to be able to do that internally. And then when we made the move over to Scale, my system administrator person who works for me was up to speed in less than an hour. And he's now certified on the product, and that took a day to get done. So it's just the whole process of going through and using the system. It's like it just works. Like there's nothing you really need to do. There's no complexity to it. Anyone who's from a VMware background might look at it and say, well, like, where are all the extra features? Where's all this? Where's that? But you don't need that in the Scale. It handles it all itself. It's just very basic. Like Shane was showing you, interface is what he saw was the whole interface. That's it. It's so simple and easy.
Great. Awesome. And I think that really speaks to the point that we were all trying to make on this webinar of making it simple and easy both to move over and then run on a day-to-day basis afterwards.
Yeah, 100%.
So I would like to thank Christy, Shane, Tim, David. Loved having the opportunity listening to you guys, learning from you guys as always. I would like to thank our attendees, and I hope that we've helped you along your path today. So thank you again to everyone here, and until next time, stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.